All right, letting the last few folks in here and we will get started.
Are you going to go any electrical generation by IC engine?
What do you think, baby? Is that part of it?
I think we're going to be open to that discussion in the production part. Certainly talk about the capability. Obviously, we don't want direct company pitches, but we certainly would like to hear about capabilities and new and ways to reimagine how we produce energy.
Excellent. All right, so let's get it started here. So as you can see on screen, we are in the Energy Prime, and you can see some of the criteria that the DoD and Air Force have laid out for their next prime. You might have remembered that Agility Prime was the first one to take off with the flying car, flying orb industry. So you can probably read it faster than I can say it. So this is kind of the criteria we'll be focusing on today. Again, the biggest part of this is that we want it to be collaborative and we want it to be a win for the DoD as well as the commercial sector. So as we go through, we want to avoid any sales pitches right now and all that fun stuff, but obviously getting into these crazy imaginable ideas that can be achieved for both industry and DoD would be where we want to focus our time. So I can take this screen down here. We have Colonel Charles Beebe Brisbos, who is leading us today, and I may have mispronounced that name, but he is an awesome leader and will be taking us through. I know he has some questions and stuff to dive in, so I'm excited to see where this conversation goes. In the chat box, we have put in a Miro link. That is the virtual whiteboard we will be using today. You are more than welcome to jump in. If not, please feel free to join the conversation. Use chat as much as you would like, and we will be recording all of that. So no worries at all if you don't want to join us on the virtual whiteboard. But from there, I'll kick it over to Beebe and allow him to kind of kick off some of the topics and why we think this is important. And he will take it on from there.
All right, technical issues. Thank you for the introduction. Appreciate it, Brian. Great group. See lots of familiar faces and lots of new ones out there in the virtual world, and glad everybody could join us today. Hopefully, you guys also were able to participate in the venture capital panel that we had that talked a lot about energy earlier in the week, and then yesterday I kind of got to lay the groundwork for this meeting, this workshop that we were going to do. So as Brian has said, the purpose, right, is to find those areas in which energy and how we reimagine energy aligns with the objectives of the primes, what AFWERX is going for in building these new primes, right? So that we could come out of this workshop and we could go back to Colonel Diller and SAP AQ and say, hey, if you guys are going to do a prime on energy, then this is where military utility, commercial needs or commercial viability and national security all kind of converge together to give the United States a big leg up, right? And this is why the Air Force should be pursuing it. So that's our objective for the next 30 minutes. We just did an exercise. My organization is the Air Force Warfighter Integration, and we are a think tank for the Chief of Staff, right? So we're different than AFWERX, but we partnered with AFWERX to recently do a challenge that I'm sure all of you are aware of. There's a Reimagining Energy Challenge, right? And inside of that, we had 6 categories, but I'll narrow it down to 3 broad categories, which were how do we reimagine the production of energy, the transmission of energy, and the storage of energy, right? And so for the next 30 minutes, myself and some other panel members that we've kind of brought in are going to kind of navigate this space, and we're going to focus first on the production, right? And we're going to kind of walk through what is the clear vision, what's the compelling military utility, where's the commercial viability, and if we pursue this, does it give the United States kind of that necessary leg up in the competition, right? And Brian and his staff in the background are going to be putting that down on Trello, and you guys can join them in and put the comments there. Awesome. Thank you, Brian. All right, so for the new group, I'm Colonel Charles Brisbois, go by BB, and I lead the Air Force Disruptive Technology team inside of the Air Force Warfighter Integration Capability, essentially a think tank for our Chief of Staff on what the future of the Air Force looks like. We've partnered with AFWorks to look at how we reimagine energy. And over the last since September, we've asked industry to bring in ideas on novel or reimagining how we produce, transmit, and store energy. So we just went over the production and we talked a lot of great ideas about production. And in this sprint, the next 30 minutes, we're going to talk a little bit about transmission and storage. We didn't spend a lot of time talking about storage. So this time, as I go around the horn, and I brought in some expert help from around the Air Force, I'd ask the panelists to focus your comments specifically on transmission. Think wireless, inductive, power beaming, all those kinds of things. And then storage, right? Like different storage technologies. And tell me your thoughts and what you've seen out there on that. We'll go through the government side of it, and then we'll go over to Heather Richmond and talk a little bit of industry, and then we'll open up the floor. And I really want to hear capability. I don't want to hear pitches, but if you've got a capability that we haven't considered and a technology that you think we should be looking at, I want to hear more about the technology. And with that, I think I will turn it over to Paul Calhoun from DARPA, an Air Force officer that's serving at DARPA right now, to talk to me about what you're excited about in the realm of transmission and storage.
Hey, thank you, sir. Yeah, so I think that transmission in particular is a really exciting area for government investment. Unlike generation and storage, there is not a whole lot of commercial investment in alternative transmission because there has already been trillions of dollars built into the national power grid infrastructure. So when you're competing against that, it is hard to get to a point where it's economically viable to find an alternate way. However, when you're looking at the particular military mission of getting power forward into austere or contested environments, we do not have that infrastructure in place. And in fact, all the infrastructures that we do use, whether they're fixed ground-based infrastructures or physical transfers of liquid hydrocarbon fuels, are all things that we know in a military environment are vulnerable to enemy attack. And so we have poor resiliency in the way that we do our energy logistics. So that gives us a real opportunity to think differently about how we do that. And one of the things that I've been very excited about, and I think is interesting for us to take a broader look at, is when you're going into these high-risk areas, what can we do to augment current power grids with wireless power transfer to create more flexible, adaptive networks that provide multi-path resilience. So that's something I'm excited about, and I'd be interested to hear what industry is thinking about along those lines as an opportunity for investment.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, Paul. Dan, over to you. You spent a lot of time thinking about operational energy. What in the area of transmission and storage really excites you?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, sir. I guess it's tough to follow promo on the transmission piece because he's really got his head wrapped around that pretty well. But a couple of things that come to mind there. I think when we start looking at the electronic warfare realm, as well as the directed energy capability realm, we, the Air Force, probably could do a better job at using industry to help us develop splinters to these projects that really leverage that work to see how we could use it for energy transmission in the sense of gathering it for use rather than a directed energy effect, if you will. So that's one thing that comes to mind. I think moving forward, we could use industry's help to, for example, take a look at a high power microwave project and ask them to help us figure out, hey, what are we doing here that we could use for this energy transmission, if we want to transfer power from one UAV to another. On the storage piece, that one I like to work backward again a little bit, and I hope it's not taken as skirting the question, but you need storage typically because you have a generation problem. If you didn't have a generation problem, you wouldn't need as much storage. Easier said than done on the ground than in the air. But I think if we can get our heads around either needing to generate less or generating as much as we need, we can reduce that storage piece. Last part to that, liquid hydrocarbons are the best form of storage that we know of. So while we talk about wanting to reduce that a lot, we really shouldn't throw that baby out with the bathwater.
That's right. Yeah, no, I agree. Okay, thanks, Dan. Doug, over to you in the round robin of panelists here.
Sorry about that. I think, again, distinguishing between military specific versus things we don't need to do is an important but tricky thing to do. We of course want to leverage and have as much dual use as we possibly can. Just one filter that I like to throw out when evaluating technologies or when binning technologies is the following. Suppose, and I believe we'll be there in the not too distant future, we have for our civilization society, our commercial society, we have energy abundantly available and cost effective. The trends are heading that way, distributed.
Okay.
So one could say maybe there's no need for Department of Energy anymore. I mean, throw that out. I don't think that's going to happen, but throw that out as a thing. We have our civilian energy sector problems solved in an environmentally stable way. That does not mean that the energy requirements for the military and the Air Force will go away. We will still want the best, the highest capability, the edge-giving military technologies that will promote our warfighting advantages. Okay, so that's an interesting question. A way to approach things is when we're binning things is what's the commercial sector going to do anyway, versus what things that they might do and there might be commercial interest. But you know, with the energy problem solved, these are still going to be things we're going to care about, and we need to invest to maintain any edge we possibly can.
Yeah, I love that. And Heather, not to put you on the spot, but I think you asked a really interesting question that should be addressed right now rather than waiting. But what are the things that industry is going to do that we probably shouldn't go into, as opposed to the ones that the DoD could really bring some dollars to and prime the pump, which is kind of the purpose of the discussion here.
I mean, batteries is one. You know, you look at Tesla and you look at, you know, a lot of the auto manufacturers now looking at electric vehicles. But I wouldn't say that just because commercial's doing it, military shouldn't. I mean, there really needs to be kind of that overlap. Just, you know, the point about some of the microgrid technology and just some of the, you know, the concept of dual use is very real, but sometimes it's military first. Also, just sometimes, you know, we were talking yesterday for the Agility Prime investor panel, we were talking about the ability of and the resources and capabilities that the military has, such as airspace, right? Like where can you test and pilot things? Where you know, if you're on a base and you are looking at residential, not that you know you're looking at one ratepayer for base housing, right? That's a much easier pathway to go to than going door to door and trying to sell things as a startup. So there's things that you guys can really aggregate, and I think it's really synergistic. So I don't think it's an either or. Grid modernization, you know, they're working on that. I'm not sure that needs to be something you guys totally focus on. But as far as storage, I mean, again, just looking at capabilities and you know, he was talking about, you know, the generation problem. If you lessen the generation problem, you don't have a storage problem. But as far as, you know, energy on forward operating bases, energy where it's difficult to generate, or it might be intermittent, or you know, there might be just weather, you know, any there's so many variables. And so I think batteries is definitely something that there's a great deal of focus on in the commercial sector. We've got some amazing batteries. I think, you know, I talk a lot about allied partnerships. I think there are other countries that have really great battery technology that we can be leveraging. And DOE has a battery 500 consortium. They're working on, you know, watt hours per kilogram right now aggressively. So I don't think it's what can the Air Force be doing just by itself and no one else is doing, but what, you know, where can you make these things move faster and put them in situations where you can be testing, where you can be providing resources to some of these startups that don't have those sorts of resources. To me, that is a benefit.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, Heather. Yeah, and we're going to come back to you. So stay ready. Doug, thank you for that. Bud, what are your thoughts?